Welcome to the OCOM podcast, Modern Medical Education, where we gather experts to discover various topics in modern medical education, with the focus of today's show being on research in medical education. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Hasty. I'm the Dean and the Chief Academic Officer of OCOM. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Latha Ganti, OCOM's founding director of research, professor here at OCOM, one of the founding faculty members, and as I usually call her, Wonder Woman, with all the things that she can do. And she's a board certified ER physician practicing still emergency medicine and doing all things OCOM. So welcome to the show, Dr. Ganti. How are things being here at OCOM?
Thank you, Dr. Hasty. Well, I'm not usually a podcast person, but this is really, really exciting. I love being at OCOM. To me, honestly, this is like my dream job. I get to come here, I get to build a department from scratch, and working at OCOM is the best thing ever. I have an amazing research coordinator, we have a lab, and I love that I get to build this infrastructure from the start.
Awesome. Yeah, I tell people all the time, Dr. Ganti's a force of nature. I'm not sure which one, the wind or whatever, but she's a very, very strong force of nature, and it's such a pleasure and honor to have you here today. So, yeah, thanks. I was going to start off just to, kind of get the conversation going, maybe just kind of have you talk a little bit about your vision of research at OCOM and what the future looks like.
Yes, for sure. So, of course, at OCOM, we're a medical school, right? And so the people that we are most vested in are going to be our students. And for students, what I find is that getting them interested in research is like a big thing, because they're here to be physicians and they have all the studying that they have to do, and they're usually stressed out. And so generally the attitude towards research is, oh, well, I'm not a researcher, or like, I don't do research, or like, oh my God, I have all this stuff to do, and now you want me to do research on top of that. So my vision for OCOM is really to start research from the beginning, where that all those myths are dispelled, all the things. And actually, you wrote an amazing piece in the ACOI newsletter recently, right? Like why people find research difficult.
Right.
So we are addressing that from day one. We have research courses each of the semesters, and in those courses, we teach them nuts and bolts of research. So in terms of vision, one is removing barriers, taking away that feeling that research is really difficult. And then I want to make sure that all the students publish, and I know we have some more topics on that coming up. I want to also make OCOM the hub for clinical trials in Central Florida, and we're well poised to do that. And then finally, what I love about OCOM is that everything is digital here. Like, for example, our library has no books. When I first came on the tour, I was like, where are the books here? And then the other thing is it's all digital signage. So there's no, like posters or anything like that. Like most campuses, you have all this plastered stuff everywhere. Everything here is like tech. And so one of the things I'm really interested in and excited about is bringing technology-driven research here.
Excellent. Well, first of all, I love that, and I think that the dream here is to really create the medical school of the future and what that looks like, and of course, one of our core values is innovation and continuous improvement. And you probably heard me say this before. I'm a big believer that excellence probably should not be a core value. I think excellence is not a state of being, it's a state of becoming. If you were doing what was excellent 5 or 10 years ago, it's probably not excellent anymore. And you always have to kind of strive for, doing, the next thing. And I also think that our society nowadays, they want that, right? They want, in some ways, innovation, even disruption in some ways, right? And they want us to, always avoiding the status quo bias, however uncomfortable that is sometimes, So,
what's funny is on the weekend we went to Epcot, and I was in the spaceship ride. And so you know how they say like the future, right?
Right,
So you can plug in what you want, whether you want leisure, how you want to travel, country, city, where
Right.
you want to live. So it's funny because when I was watching that, I was thinking, I should create something like that for research. What do I want it to look like? And have that be something that we do in the first day of classes.
Oh, that's awesome. I
Right?
love
Just
that.
as a fun project.
I love that. Yeah, so I think some of the viewers probably know this already, or the listeners, and we actually have a lot of shared DNA with Disney in some ways. Walt Disney. I think we might even have an OCOM here had it not been for Walt Disney. making that decision back in the 60s to, buy a piece of land that's larger than the size of Manhattan. And we're about 3.2 miles, I think, from the Magic Kingdom. I always like to joke around. I think we're the only medical school that has fireworks every single night.
That's right.
And it's pretty cool. And, and of course, Disney was famous for saying, that it'll never be complete. It'll always continue to improve. And he also looked at this community. He really actually wanted the whole community to be the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Although, fast forward after his death and Epcot, turned into a theme park as opposed to the actual urban planning I think that he had originally visioned. But I think that the Orlando Metro is becoming, that experimental prototype community of tomorrow. In fact, Mayor Demings has talked about and that's one of his talking points. And I think with the leadership here that we have in the community, the civic leadership, the hospital leadership, that we're truly doing it. And actually, I know this, but actually, our research lab itself was inspired a little bit from Epcot, the land ride, where you will go through and you see the research lab in there, and had the kind of glass front. So when you go on the boat on the land ride, you saw the researchers in there, doing their botany stuff and everything. And as a kid, that always inspired me. So I told the architect that. He said, "Oh, we'll put a glass front, a storefront for the biosafety NIH biosafety level 2 research lab." And so.
That's
Hopefully it
awesome.
does inspire. Now you mentioned about the generational changes. One of the things that I always, when I talk to, folks applying, an interview day, I'll tell you, one of the number one questions comes up is research. And I'd say over the last 20 years in medical education, at least from my perspective, it's increased significantly. Because I remember 20 years ago when I would talk to prospective medical students, occasionally they would ask about research, and half the time I thought that they were trying to, placate me and my interest in research or whatever, and say, "Oh yeah, research." But now, they seem to really be interested more than ever. So,
So I think it's twofold. I mean, on one hand, and I speak also as a mother of a medical student myself, but I think nowadays with the way medical education is, first of all, the residencies have become so competitive, right? There are more medical school seats, but the same number of residency positions. And I think one of the ways for people to distinguish themselves is through research. So now the COMLEX is pass fail, so you don't have that. You have to kind of wait till the second COMLEX to be able to get a score that you can prove yourself on. And so I feel like research is one of the few ways that students can still distinguish themselves as competitive, for the competitive specialties or the competitive programs or whatever. So I feel like there's definitely interest there. I also think there is some recognition of the satisfaction and joy that comes from having a career that is diverse. So not just working, 20 ER shifts a month for the next 30 years, but perhaps mixing that up with teaching, with research. And if you don't get it when you're in medical school, it's unlikely you're going to get it later. So I think, this generation is so much smarter, I feel, than we
yeah,
were when we were going through school. I just applied, signed up, did as I was told, didn't ask any questions. I don't think I had any original thoughts for myself.
right.
But I think this generation really thinks about like, what's it going to be? Like, I don't want to burn out in my career. How can I diversify my career? How can I get joy from my career and give back to my community? I also think they're pretty advanced in terms of recognizing that research is really how we make anything better, right? If you
Right.
don't ask questions and you don't investigate, then how do you become better,
Right.
right? And so I think they care about making medicine better, making med tech better, right? So we have so many advances. Like, I never questioned where a Foley catheter came from. Somebody had to think about it to make it. I just used it. And I think now we have so much technology. We have wearable tech, we have fitness tech. And so I think the interest stems from both of those things.
Yeah, I agree, and I like what you said. I'm actually inspired by this generation of folks going through medical school now. I think that this actually may turn out to be the best generation of folks ever to become physicians. Their desire to serve and make a difference in the world is much more than than certainly in my generation, right? You go down to any medical school across the country. I mean, they're doing service projects. Our students, they're volunteering for the Disney marathons, for the health,
Running
which
free clinics.
yeah,
Yep.
all that stuff. And then I just saw something they were at Nemours Children's Hospital doing some service thing, and all these different things, or like the Toys for Tots thing that they're doing. I mean, just to me, it's just incredible. And I do think that research has the opportunity to change the world, right? And, medical students, and I've seen medical students make a huge difference in terms of their research. I mean, there's been, tons of, examples, folks changing the world through research. I think of, I think his name was Stephen Nurkin. And, Stephen Nurkin, he was just on a third or fourth year elective rotation. And, he said, well, let's culture neckties. And, sure enough, British, it came out in the neckties, because most folks don't dry
Right.
clean or launder their neckties after they wear them, or at least not as frequently as they should. And they had all this, bacteria and stuff like that. And so, and of course, the British Medical Association ends up banning neckties. I think the AMA did something with neckties. And, so this is a elective rotation research that changed the world. And, his desire was to get into cardiothoracic surgery, which, he did, right? So, just, many, many examples. It's like Helicobacter pylori, which is a major cause of peptic ulcer disease. That was a training directed research, and I believe he ended up, Australian researcher, I think, ended up winning the Nobel Prize. And so, you talk about, things that can change the world. Those are, yeah, and I'm excited. It's like the number of publications that are inaugural class. I don't know what is it up to now, 6 or 7 or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
6 or 7.
yeah.
We had in the first week. So, usually I start out the research course with Get Published Now, right? And so that is just basically an inspirational lecture to show that anybody can publish, right? It's just a skill like any other skill, and go through the nuts and bolts of how do you do it. Once I was done with the lecture and I felt like everybody was all juiced up and ready to go, I kind of threw down the gauntlet and I said, just saying, not required, but for anybody who is interested in this call for papers, it's a simple call for papers, Curious Journal of Medical Science, biography of a medical pioneer. There are numerous pioneers in medicine, right? And so you could pick anybody you want, pick your person. And, people got a little excited. And I said, and it's due next Friday. I was actually in a wedding on that next Friday, so I was out of town. And believe me, so it was due on the Friday. That Friday morning, I got so many calls, even while I was at the wedding, from kids who were meeting up in our study rooms, like outside of class, and working together to get these papers done. And so at one point, literally, because I was walking out of the wedding ceremony so many times, one of the Indian aunties said, "Bathroom problem?" And I'm like, oh no, I should probably just sit outside because my students keep calling me. But they got the material in, submitted it by the deadline. There were 21 students who submitted 14 papers.
I
Yep.
love it.
So,
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. When I was a first year medical student in the first few months of medical school, I was still trying to find out where the restroom was,
yeah.
let alone get published. And we've had, 6 or 7 publications already and all these submissions, it's inspirational. And I hope that you record that get published now. Now I've been across the country. I've heard people talk about research and, research directors and everything, trying to, get people motivated to do research. That by far is the best presentation, the best session I've ever heard to inspire people to research. I hope you do record it, and I hope we push it out.
Thank you. Well, my boss wants me to, so I think I'm going to be doing that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you talked a little bit about the barriers for research, and and I like the fact that it's like the classic Cotter's change model. The first one is sense of urgency. Oh well, it's due next Friday or whatever, and then of course you have the wins along the way and stuff like that. So it's like the classic Cotter's change model to get this inaugural class to get inspired to get published and everything. And I also think it's good that folks kind of get over that initial intimidation of research, right? I mean, I think, truth be said, that's probably one of the major barriers for research, right? Just getting past that first challenge, right? And if they can get that win under their belt, see what it's like to write up a paper, to get published, going through, the mechanisms, then I think that can potentially make them a researcher for life, and that curious, to be able to satiate those curious questions that kind of come up, and those observations that all of us go through, right? I mean, heck, I'm always thinking about ideas I'd love to get published and everything, and I think by having those wins under their belt and actually knowing what the process is like for the mechanisms of getting published, I think it's going to be helpful. And now, of course, the barriers, it's always, the classic barriers, as far as I recall, the number one barrier for trainees to actually get research done is time, right? They always
Right.
complain about not enough time, but I know that you actually have incorporated time throughout the curriculum, time to, spend time on research and stuff, which I think is pretty cool.
I think the approach is one, you make it easy, you make it accessible, and then you have their name printed early, right? So as soon as you see your name in print, just like when you see your name in the lights, you're hooked.
Right,
And
right.
once you're hooked, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. What's my next project? And so I a few years ago when I was in residency research and residency research director, I had a kid, and residents, we only have like 6 or 7 residents per class. One of the kids in the residency program basically said, look, um, I know you're the residency research director. I know I'm supposed to publish something in my 3 years. Okay, but I'm just going to be straight with you. He said, I'm a family guy. I'm married. I got 2 kids. I just want to get through this residency. I already know which hospital I'm going to practice in. I'm going back to my family in South Florida. And I'm just not a researcher. Is there anything else I can do? I'm happy to carry your bag, wash your car, like any of that. I just want to get through this program. Okay. And I said, you can't wash my car or anything like that, but I'll walk you through a project. And he was like, yeah, that's the thing. I don't actually even want to do a project. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm not being disrespectful. And he said, so what's the minimum I can do? I said, all right, well, I got to think about how I'm going to approach this. And then the next day he said, hey, you know what? One of the internal medicine residents, she has a project. She said she could put me on. Would that work? I said, well, you have to do some work for it. All right. So anyway, they put the project together, and then I said, why don't we submit this as an abstract to the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine? And he was like, I'm not all that. I'm good. Like I don't need to do anything else. If you tell me my requirement is done, I'm good. I said, no, I think we should submit it as an abstract. So we submitted it. What happens? He wins the best resident research abstract award.
Love it.
And so he couldn't believe it. But then after that, it was really funny because the next time he came to my office, I figured he was just going to ask me, like, is my requirement met?
Huh,
So he comes in and I said, your requirement is met. You're good. He goes, actually, it was a really good experience.
huh.
Um, I think I want to do my own project.
Love it.
And so I was like, wow, okay. I said, what happened to you're not a researcher? He goes, I don't know. I think I am a researcher. I just didn't know it.
Love it. Love it. It's amazing that sometimes that little endorphin rush
Yeah.
can inspire us to do more and to create more. And of course, I admire your leadership in research, right? One definition of leadership is to make something happen that wasn't there before, and to inspire other people to do research. I mean, that's you know classic leadership. And I
That's
think
what.
that's something we need, even more of in the research world. I'm so glad that we have you. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So 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 what type of research projects are we looking at OCOM over the next couple of
Right.
years? Yeah.
So there's two things. So sometimes, like being a researcher is usually 1 or 2 faculty members who have their own research. They're in the lab, and that's what they do. And maybe as a student, you can join or not. I feel like for a research director at a medical school, it's kind of a different job. It's not you being a researcher making your mark in one small area. Rather, you are teaching others how to do research and you're getting them excited about research so then they can go off and do things. So, thinking about that, we've strategically kind of organized how we're going to approach research. So, what are projects that students can do either individually or in groups? A lot of our students work in their CBL groups and then they produce their papers together as well.
Right.
Um, so one thing is clinical trials, bringing in clinical trials that we can do in our lab. It affords students the opportunities to kind of see like how are clinical trials done. They can participate in the blood draws and things like that if they want to. Some of these sponsored trials we don't actually own the data, right? Because we're a site for them, but still there is plenty of learning involved, for those who are interested. So that's one thing. Make ourselves a clinical trial hub. It also brings in some funding that we can then use for summer research internships. Another area that I find is successful with students are survey research. So we've kind of figured out how to do surveys in a painless kind of way, partnering with some tech companies. And for example, one of our OMS 1 students, Krina Patel, just after a couple of weeks of starting medical school, put together this very elegant survey on the public's perception of OMM for chronic pain. So literally just kind of wrote out maybe 10, 15 questions to get at the core of the question. And the results are already in. Actually, we are meeting later this afternoon to analyze the results. And so
Nice.
she will be, publishing that paper and submitting it to an osteopathic medical meeting.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I recently had a podcast on osteopathic manipulative medicine. I'm glad you brought that up. And to me, I think that there's nothing more osteopathic than research. And a lot of folks maybe listening to this show, you know, don't know, the origin of osteopathic medicine. It was really founded by a physician by the name of A.T. Still. 1874, he started the profession. 1892, he started the first osteopathic medical school. And in the charter for the first osteopathic medical school, he said to put a more scientific, rational basis on the practice of medicine. I'm paraphrasing slightly there. And, of course, this was in the context of what was happening in the 19th century in America, where they were given arsenic and poisoning really poisons to patients. And he wanted to have that evidence-based medicine incorporated into the profession. And so, there's nothing more osteopathic than research. And I'm so glad that, and of course, to doing it on one of the aspects that he put in forward was musculoskeletal, treatments, diagnosis and treatment, using the hands, which, and it was interesting. He was so in evidence-based medicine, but he didn't really have some of the evidence for some of the things that he's doing. But the evidence actually bore that out, that it is very effective and safe for low back pains and things like that. Or we were even talking about the headaches. He just discovered that if you put a pressure under the inion, and the occiput, it's actually a treatment for headaches. And I think he was doing a piece of wood or a handle of a hoe or something like that, and that he found that would relieve some of the headaches, and so now that's one of the treatments that's been proven. So the fact that you're doing research on osteopathic medicine is to me is pretty cool. Yeah, so
We have
awesome.
some pretty cool students.
We do,
Uh,
and a cool director of research. Yeah. So let me, you mentioned industry sponsored research. I know that we recently just signed our first industry sponsored research clinical trial. I don't know if you want to mention that.
Sure. So it's a very simple, elegant trial. Basically, it is looking at a serum marker to find out whether your URI is of bacterial or viral origin. I'll tell you, as an ER doc, I see a plenty of URIs, right? Cough, cold, congestion, whatever. Now, if they just want a work note, that's fine. But a lot of times they also want antibiotics. And you know very well it's viral, most likely to be viral. But if I had a test that I could tell them, here, look, your URI is viral. That's why you don't need the antibiotics. Then I don't have to fight the good fight every single time that they want antibiotics for their viral syndrome.
Right.
So simple but elegant. And if it bears out, I think we really be able to have better antibiotic stewardship.
Excellent. Excellent. I love it. And hopefully it's the beginning of a rich future in research, in terms of making a difference in the world
Yeah,
through
for sure.
research.
I
Yeah.
think with anything, like when you're starting a new infrastructure, it's just getting that first paper published, that
Right.
first clinical trial done, getting your first, lab inspection done, because those are the things that feel like barriers. Even though I've been doing this for many, many years, every time you go to a new place, there's always something a little different. Like you didn't, sign this form, or you didn't get this machine, like, serviced or something like that. So it's great to have projects that begin right away, because that's how you iron out all the kinks.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We mentioned that we have a NIH biosafety level 2 research lab, and of course I walk by and it's beautiful. It's got all the PCR machines, and we can do incredible wet lab stuff there. But when I go to medical schools across the country, I see less of interest in that. And even with our PhD faculty here that had backgrounds in wet lab research and stuff like that, it seems like they're much more interested in doing things like AI research and other types of research nowadays. And yeah.
For sure. I think, things are evolving, right? And I think the people who are focused on traditional wet lab research may be in places that are not medical schools only, right? They may be in like laboratories, they may be in industry labs and things like that. Right now, I think you're right. I think people are so much more interested in innovation, in tech, in AI. And, that can be its own podcast, of course, right? When we
Right.
talk about AI, we talk about machine language, we talk about deep learning, we talk about good old fashioned AI. There's all of that. Um, and there's actually a lot of funding for those types of research projects as well. In fact, our simulation team, and I think we recently had a podcast on simulation, they are looking at using AI for grading our SOAP notes versus a faculty doing SOAP notes. And as a faculty member, my first reaction was, oh, awesome, good, I don't have to do it anymore. But I think it's very interesting because it will be good to know, like, maybe the grades are more consistent, maybe the grades are less subjective, right? Because we always worry about that. So I think there's so much there to do. Also, with regard to innovation, we talked about our school being so tech heavy and so tech advanced. One of the projects we're also very excited about is our partnership with Apple. So Apple, of course, makes tons of products, but one of the projects that we are looking at is looking at their hearing aid technology and to see how that would improve quality of life. Right here in Winter Garden, we've got a fabulous community in terms of doing this type of research work, a very engaged community as well. And so maybe on the next podcast, we can talk more about that.
I love it. Yeah, that's incredible. And of course, I love this whole AI for grading SOAP notes. And just so I'm sure probably not everybody knows what a SOAP note is, but that's how physicians document it. Actually, it's an acronym that stands for subjective, objective,
Assessment
assessment, and
plan.
plan. And it's basically how every physician documents their standard encounter. Technically, the first encounter is usually a history and physical, and each subsequent encounter is a SOAP note, which is basically kind of going through, what the patient's being seen for that day. And I can tell you, over the years, I've graded a lot of SOAP notes for medical students, and thousands and thousands, and I don't have no idea how many hours, but way too many if you ask me. I mean,
Mhm.
it's important work, and but if there's a way that AI can make it a little bit easier for the faculty member, I mean, to me that's the hope of AI, right? To make our lives better, and also to improve performance, right? So if we can, decrease the time that we're doing it, and also making a better product for the students and giving better feedback, to me that's like incredible, right?
Yeah.
And
I think one of the other incredible things at OCOM is the vast variety of partnerships that we have. So we've got an excellent relationship with Lakeland Regional, and they're a trauma center, huge, huge high volume place. So one of the partnerships that we're excited about on the research front is with Lakeland Regional. We are going to be looking at the TQIP and NESQIP databases. So those are national trauma and surgical databases, which allow us to really provide a lot of opportunities for our students who are interested in going into surgery.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, and Lakeland's an incredible place. Home of America's second busiest emergency department. Most people, wouldn't think
Yeah.
about that. Lakeland, Florida, which was home of public
Publix.
supermarkets.
Yep.
It was started I think it was in the 1920s by George Jenkins, who took an old Piggly Wiggly and turned it into the first Publix, and now there's Publix throughout the Southeast United States. And
It's the only place I shop.
yeah, so I'm actually a Publix retiree. I think I'm the only medical school dean in the world that's a Publix retiree. That I worked at Publix for 5 years. As soon as I turned 14, and I started working at Publix, and I did that up until the time I had to take the MCAT. And actually, they invite me out to the the retired picnic and stuff like that. I need to go one of these years. And actually, they gave me a lot of stock. Actually, I have the stock that they gave me when I retired is worth more than all the money I made, working there. And I actually get a nice little dividend. So yeah, thank you for shopping at Publix.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. And Publix is one of the most competitive places to work. So, I have 5 kids, and all my boys have applied to Publix the day they turned 14,
Huh.
and none of them got it. And I made them apply over and over and over until they finally got it. So, yeah, it's a great place to work.
Uh, uh,
Wonderful employer.
I'll tell you, it changed my life. I mean, I was, a little rough around the edges, growing up, and then, it transformed me to, who I am today. I think, that, and of course, going to medical school, and I think that, the experiences that I had and everything. In fact, my first boss, a guy by the name of Dave Freeborn, he actually came to our ribbon cutting here. He recently retired from Publix after 43 years, but he was probably the first non-family member that really cared about me, and and really kind of help mentor me. And I love that guy, and the difference that he's made for so many people. And of course, what Publix does for the community is pretty significant. So yeah, I'm a big Publix fan. But
Amazing.
anyway, so that's Lakeland, and then one of our other partners, which I'm not sure if most folks know about this, but, Advent Health actually has some interesting corollaries with the osteopathic profession. So, in the 19th century, it was actually born out of Kellogg.
Hmm.
So, if you remember the whole story, Kellogg had actually created a sanatorium in Battle Creek, Michigan, and he actually discovered, or he was trying to get a healthier breakfast for folks, and he made cornflakes, and it ended up being this huge thing, right? And of course, Kellogg's is a major, brand and
I
stuff like
love
that.
cornflakes.
Yeah, yeah. And so really, as an outshoot of that, there were other sanatoriums that were launched from this with sort of, I guess, the Battle Creek model from, Mr. Kellogg or Dr. I think it was Dr. Kellogg. And then, Loma Linda, and then of course that went on to create Loma Linda University and Research Center, which is one of the top, places in the country. And it also created a sanatorium in Florida, in Central Florida, which became the nidus of what's now called Advent Health, which is Florida's largest nonprofit hospital system, and they're doing incredible work. And so it's interesting. And the reason why Kellogg had originally started that was because of his desire to make a difference. When they were giving arsenic and mercury to patients, he wanted to improve things, and he was very research minded, and trying to improve patient care and stuff like that. So anyway, interesting corollary backgrounds, and we're very blessed that they're one of our great partners as well.
Yeah.
So
Crazy how far we've come.
yeah, it is, and it really isn't that long. I mean,
Right.
140 years or whatever it's been. 150 years for the osteopathic profession this year. So it's incredible. So, this has been incredible. So what other things that you think we should discuss today?
Hmm. I guess one thing I need to say is if you are a pre-med student and considering where to go to medical school, I definitely feel like OCOM is the place to come. Why? Because we have a wide variety of faculty with different areas of expertise. And of course, since this is a research podcast, I'm going to tell you as a medical student, this is the best place to get your feet wet with research.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I often think about that. Where would I go to medical school again? 100% would be OCOM. I mean, obviously, I'm a little biased, but but I think that was part of the founding team, right? We wanted to create a medical school that we would have wanted to have gone to. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She actually wants to go to medical school. She wants to go to OCOM, and and to me, a part of my heart was, I wanted to create a medical school that I would want her to go to. And, there's nothing in the world I love more than my daughter. And, to create a medical school that would be the best medical school for her, I think is important. So, and I think we've done that here, right? The culture, I always tell, people ask me, what's the best part of OCOM? And it's the team, really,
Yeah.
the faculty, the staff. I've been to other medical schools, nobody's none of them are as good as the faculty and staff that we have here in terms of the expertise, the knowledge, the caringness, the empathy, the support that we give the students. And of course, we have this curriculum that is, I think light years ahead of most medical school curriculum in terms of adult education. Everything's been, evidence-based, in terms of learning outcomes for future physicians and everything. So, the facility's great. The technologies, as we talked about, it's incredible. And then I think what we're going to do in terms of research is also pretty
Yeah.
incredible. So
You remember when my son was here, right? So my son Tor is a fourth year medical student, and he came here and he said, "Mom, why didn't you send me to medical school here?" And I said, "Well, because it wasn't around when you were applying, you know." But yeah, he was just blown away by the facilities, what the students have, and yeah, really incredible.
I just came back from a conference, and I had so many medical students that came up to me, and their friends were going here, or they'd heard about it, and they were upper class people, second and third years, and they were like, "I wish it was open when I applied. I would have definitely
Yes,
have gone there. You guys are really doing some cool stuff."
exactly.
So
Tor is in the Pleme at Brown, and one of the things he said is, "You guys have to have a program from high school, so people like me can just apply and be done with it and come here."
right, yeah, and I believe that too, right? We need to create that opportunity for folks.
Yeah, get the best early.
So absolutely. So, well, great. Anyway, this has been an incredible show, Dr. Ganti. It's been such a pleasure and honor to talk to you. Thank you for being on the OCOM podcast, Modern Medical Education today. Any final words?
Thank you. It's truly my pleasure. I could not be happier. Honestly, like for me, being at OCOM is my dream come true.
It's a dream to have you here, Dr. Ganti, and we're very blessed. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning into this episode of OCOM Podcast Modern Medical Education. And this has been your host, Dr. Robert Hasty, and I hope you all have a great week.